Oh, I didn't put the community news item in.
Because I lost my connection.
Yeah.
Today's going great, hey?
No, it's going good so far. Welcome to GCP Life, episode number 70 for Friday, the 2nd of August 2024. GCP Life is sponsored by Mantle Group. At Mantle Group, we make your Google Cloud solutions possible. And I'm your host, Stephen Bancroft. On today's show, we take a look at the Google Q2 results. Google gets serious about its VMWare offering. Has your Mac been targeted in the latest scam? Plus, what could you be getting for free in the AI wars? But before we get to any of that, I'd like to introduce the co-host of the show, Adish Panther. How are you, Adish?
I'm good, thanks, Banky. How are you?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. I'll just close a few things on my laptop here so I don't get any annoying pop-ups while we're recording. But no, good. Had a little bit of rain here, but yeah, it's very wintry here at the moment. What about yourself?
Yeah, it's freezing, eh? Hoping we're getting towards the tail end of winter now. But apart from that, having lots of Mac issues before our podcast today. So that's been fun.
A few little technical issues there. Macs are all good until you actually want to do something on them, right?
Yeah, can't use anything open source on them.
That seems to be the way. Linux for the win, baby. Linux for the win. Yeah, this podcast, well, I record and edit and produce this show completely on Linux. So there you go. It is possible to do.
Macs are great if you just want to use Apple services. If you want Final Cut Pro, if you want whatever Apple's audio recording thing is, if you want to use all of that, they're great because they all work seamlessly with minimal memory usage.
Yep. Yeah. As soon as you go outside that ecosphere, yeah, you're having trouble there today, but we worked around it, so yeah. Look, outside of our technical troubles today, I got the old email to recert for my Google Cloud Architect exam.
Ooh.
So I jumped in there into Skills Boost and started on the diagnostic questions. And we'll see how we go. I did about an hour yesterday afternoon, just after I received the email, and I'll probably do a little bit this afternoon after we record. But I'm going to try and work through. In the past, I've sort of dragged it out and done it, as late as I can. They give me the rev up and say, "Oh, it's got to be done by 30th of September," which is 8 weeks away. But I might try and study as quickly as I can and get it done as quickly as I can this time.
And how many certs do you have? Google Cloud only?
6, I believe. Last time I checked.
That's almost all of them, right?
Yeah, look, it's all of them. I'm not. I had this idea to get all of them at one point, but I sort of shelved that idea because it's going to involve me getting the data cert, the data admin cert, the ML cert. I don't have the associate cert, believe it or not.
And you love data, right?
Become a meme, hasn't it? I don't jive with data, mate. I don't jive with it.
I think one of our Mandalorians, David Liebert, has collected all Google certs, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, if that's something you want to try, definitely worth speaking with David.
Yeah, I did have that ambition at one point, but then the whole VMware thing came along, and I'd like to get a couple of VMware certs as well to go along with it, but that's still a work in progress.
Yeah, I think the annoying thing about these certs is that they expire after a certain time. So you got to sit down, you got to do a bit of refresher because things change over 2 to 3 years, and you got to do that exam again.
That's right. And it's really just the changes, right? That's you've got to keep across. So I'll blast through the skills boosts as quickly as I can, and just refresh on the changes. And then really my strategy to it is to really drill those sample questions that Google give you. That's, that helps a lot, especially with the architects, because you've got to think differently. They give you scenarios, and you've got to pick apart the scenario they give you, and you've got to line up the solution with, what could potentially come from a client or a business case, right?
Yeah.
But we had a couple of things interesting happening during the week. Now, look, we're not going to talk about CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike's been done to death. There's 1,000,001 YouTube videos you can go and watch and see what happened. But, yeah, look, I mean, everyone probably knows now what happened. Looks like CrowdStrike have pushed out what they call a content update, and that's affected the kernel-level driver. And, of course, if you get things wrong at the kernel level, it just blue screens the whole machine. I guess the question now that it's raised for everyone is the idea of, this, what they call it, vulnerability bias, where you're completely reliant on one service across the board for everything, right? And then a company like one change like that can just, you might have had redundant servers, right? You got redundant switches, you got redundant everything, but your software is not redundant, right? It's the same on each machine, and the change has been pushed to both machines, so you lose the lot, all your kiosks, everything. I suppose that's probably the question, the big thing that has raised. How are we going to, be redundant at that level in future? In my mind now, it's like, well, if you're going to go to the effort of having redundant hardware, why not have redundant software as well? Have one, and this is completely ridiculous, I can't ever see it happening, but why not have one Windows and one Linux doing the same thing, right? It was completely different ecosystems. That's kind of the thinking you have to have now when we're suddenly dependent on, one piece of software or one company to supply this kind of systems.
Yeah, that redundancy point, I hadn't actually thought about it in that manner. So it's very valid and very interesting problem that maybe some vital organizations will start looking to solve. One personal anecdote I can add to the CrowdStrike incident was I was actually flying back from Hobart on the Friday that it happened. So I was involved in all the chaos of trying to navigate around an airport so my flight was around 7 p.m. and this incident happened 3 p.m. right? So
we were one of the first to get it, right? So they pushed it out for nighttime in the US, but of course that's the middle of our day.
Yeah, correct. So luckily for me, I was flying Virgin, and Virgin was unaffected. Jetstar and Qantas, all the Jetstar flights were cancelled. Most of Qantas flights were cancelled. So I lucked out, but I saw the chaos firsthand when I was going to the airport.
Yeah, right. Virgin don't use CrowdStrike. It's as simple as that, right?
Yeah.
Look, I didn't have CrowdStrike. I have my Mantle issued laptop. Mantle does use CrowdStrike. My Mantle issued laptop has CrowdStrike on it, but it's a Linux machine, so it wasn't affected. As far as I know, we did have some individuals in Mantle that were using Windows machines that were affected by it. Now, the problem I didn't personally experience this, but as far as I know, the big problem came about if you were using BitLocker on your hard drive, and those BitLocker credentials were in your Active Directory. That's typically where they're stored, and you're basically unable to boot the machine without knowing what that BitLocker credential was. So that could have been a problem for some. I have no doubt in some cases it was going to have to be format the machine and rebuild it from scratch. And then outside of that, our old friends at Optus, I'll link an article in AFR. It's behind a paywall, but you'll see the first paragraph, and you'll have a little chuckle at yourself. The telco that failed to prevent the theft of customers' details, 10 million Australians, was celebrated on Thursday night for its cybersecurity and received an Online Safety Innovations Award. Let that soak in for a minute. Optus, who let 10 million details of 10 million users out, got an award for online safety.
The only thing we don't know is what are the criterias. What criteria was used to make this assessment? Was it a year-on-year improvement? Maybe they've improved a lot since the last outage of the year. We don't know, right?
Maybe, but it just seems like a faux pas, really.
100%. Look,
like you can't,
definitely read sketchy because we don't know the selection criteria and we don't know what components were looked at. I'm just playing the devil's advocate to instigate you, Banky, to say maybe.
Anyway, it still made me have a little chuckle, and I thought we weren't going to talk about it ad nauseum. I just thought I'd mention it at the top of the show. Other than that, no tech adventures for me. Just working on a new clients thing here at Mantle, and that's kind of been it for me. How about we get on with the community news, hey?
Yeah, sounds good. So community news, there's a GGG Cloud Sydney meetup. We do this monthly meetup coming up in August. It's on the 13th of August starting at 5:30 p.m. At the Mantle offices. Mantle Group is a sponsor of GGG Cloud Sydney with venue and catering. The page says there are 3 talks. Talk 1 is
3 talks.
Log management for Kotlin multi-platform projects. We don't know who the speaker is. Talk 2 is serverlessing like a pro, done by Love E. And the third one is Slack chatbots using Gemini AI, done by Ian Brown. Yes.
Very keen to get down there and see that and catch up with Ian Brown, the previous co-host of the show here. Make sure you get to that. Do we give the times yet? That's at 5:30 at 580 George Street, Sydney. I'll put a link in the show notes. Pretty easy to get to. Just get to Town Hall Station, and you don't even need to go out in the street. You just find the right exit at the Town Hall Station, and then you just pop up the top.
Keeps finding the right exit, though.
If you've got to find the right exit. Yeah, that's right. Get along to that. Also, raffle for 2 JetBrain IDE licenses and some food and drinks. Should be a good night. All right, then, with that out of the way, let's get on with the news items. And first news item this week is the Google Q2 results, and looks pretty good. Q2 results look pretty good.
Yeah, looks very good. Specifically for Google Cloud, the Google Cloud revenue was for quarter 2 2024 was 10.35 billion, which is a 29% year-on-year increase of more than $2 billion. So very impressive numbers.
Yeah, let's dive into those numbers a little bit. Advertising sales, Alphabet Chief's revenue score rose 11% to 64.6 billion. That's from advertising. And then the net income in the quarter ending June 30 rose 28.6% to 23.6 billion, besting the average estimate of 22.9 billion. So across the board, it's come in higher than most analysts predicted. And interestingly for us, revenue from cloud computing rose 28.8% to 10.35 billion. Analysts had expected 10.16 billion. So once again, we're seeing that growth quarter on quarter.
Yeah, and just to complete the article, total revenue for the quarter was around 84.75 billion, which was a 15% growth, 14% growth.
Yep. But there was some spending in January and March period. The company's capital expenditure had jumped 91% to 12 billion, which actually spooked investors a little bit. But I think off the back of the results, I mean, that's justified spending.
Yeah, and do you think those capital expenditures are a lot on, your data centers, better and bigger infrastructure to enable further growth, especially in generative AI, the Gemini services, Vertex AI for Google Cloud, all of those, right?
Yeah, nearly every week there's a story, right? New data center, undersea cables, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
So we've been covering that for the last few episodes. So those extra capital expenditure probably doesn't come as a surprise.
But they're not spending $23 billion on a cyber startup.
Yes.
The Wiz deal that we talked about last week is off. Wiz walked away from it.
Yeah, so there was a report from CNN earlier in the month that indicated that there was this advanced talk between Alphabet and Wiz, but that's now been called off. It's interesting to note that Google and Wiz began their communication when Wiz raised $1 billion from venture capital investors earlier this year, which had a valuation of $12 billion. So, yeah, I guess they didn't like the valuation. I guess there was some mismatch in expectations, but the deal fell through.
So the company would now, CEO Asaf Rappaport said the company will now focus on an initial public offering and growing the business to generate $1 billion in annual revenue. That's a big goal.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense for a company that's valued at $12 billion, I guess.
Look, these cyber companies, is it tulips? I can't help thinking it's tulips, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. It is a lot of valuation just based on perceived perception,
guesswork, right?
Or perceived valuation.
Yeah.
Sorry, rather than perceived anything. So.
We'll see, but a few companies vying for this space at the moment. We'll see how it pans out for these guys. Had a cool item come across by way of one of our internal Slack channels. Open Tofu. Now, if you're not aware of Open Tofu was a fork of Terraform, and I think we mentioned it before. We've mentioned it on the show. It was forked because of a licensing change in Terraform, and just to help me out here, Adish, I think it was done because for commercial reuse of Terraform. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So OpenTofu was created in response to HashiCorp's decision to change Terraform's license from open source to business source license, or what we call as BUSL. So like you mentioned, it's just a fork. They're largely similar. So just off the top of my head, OpenTofu, some of the similarities with Terraform is the functionality remains the same. Both tools allow you to define and manage your cloud infrastructure through IAC. State management both maintain a state file to track the current state of your infrastructure. The provider ecosystem is same. So initially, OpenTofu is compatible with existing Terraform providers, which allow you to manage resources across various cloud platforms. The difference really comes in licensing. Like I said earlier, OpenTofu is open source. It's licensed under Mozilla Public License 2.0, which is a very permissive open source license, whereas Terraform is a BUSL, which has restrictions on commercial use.
Commercial use, yeah. Now, they've been the same up until now with the release of OpenTofu 1.8. And it's introduced a couple of new features. Some of these features the Terraform community has been asking for them for years. And one that I'm actually quite excited about, you can now use variables and locals in places that you were not previously available, such as module sources, backend configuration, and state encryption.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited about that feature, being honest, because that makes dynamic code for pipelines for across multiple environments an absolute ease. So I've been in situations in the past where we really had to build a hack around the system where I was putting in a random string for the state and ingesting the state bucket during pipeline runtime through variables.
Yep. And using sed to modify the file before you feed it into your pipeline.
Correct, yeah.
Hacky things like that, yeah.
So it really removes conditions like that where you want to use, you want to be dry, you want to have a clean pipeline. That really helps with this, yeah.
And you want to remove that need for any sort of wrappers like that, right? Because a wrapper like that just complicates things.
Yeah.
Right? Just want to have it as clean as possible. So that I'm really excited about. I remember when I was first learning Terraform, I put variables in there and it's just like, well, why not? Why can't I have a variable in here, right? They just quickly, I think they've changed when the variables evaluated. They brought that earlier in the the application of when they set up the graph or something in Terraform, they just evaluate those variables earlier. So now you can use them there. They've introduced a new extension. Now this is a cool feature with the .tofu extension. So you can have a tofu file now in parallel with a .tf file, and they could be the same code, but OpenTofu will evaluate the tofu file first. This is for backwards compatibility, and if you want to start introducing tofu, you can keep the TF file there, basically copy it to a tofu file, and then as you introduce the new tofu features, it'll use a tofu file in preference.
Yeah, and that's quite an important point. So any of the new features that we just previously discussed, it wouldn't work in the .tf files because that's a Terraform feature, whereas using variables in a backend config, that's a tofu specific feature. So to use those features, you'd have to use the .tofu extension in your IAC configuration.
Yep. And then a couple of new features which I don't completely grok, but you might be able to help me out with this one. We've got provider mocking and resource overrides. Now, I get how these would be useful, being able to set up tests and mock things, but I didn't quite understand the examples that they gave here.
Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure about those examples as well, but where I can see this being useful is where, probably doing a little bit of testing for your configuration, not necessarily pulling all the provider configuration while running your IAC. But I wasn't too sure about the examples. I'd probably have to play with the tools to actually get a solidified real world use case for this.
Yeah. I think one of the things you would be able to do, just reading through that, is basically run a test
Correct.
like to parse your Terraform, but it won't create the resources.
Correct. So it's really useful, I mean, the debate about whether IAC is actually software engineering is always ongoing, right? But this is more about adding a few more quality gates in your IAC definitions, so that you are treating this like a software feature that you develop. So one of the commands that this article says you can run is a Tofu test, right? So that's this allows really it's adding that traditional software testing mechanism into infrastructure configuration, because let's be honest, when was the last time you ran a Terraform test in your IAC configuration?
Oh, it doesn't happen.
Correct.
It doesn't happen. Yeah. I think we're pretty fortunate with Google Cloud. We can just have another project.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just have another project, and you call that dev or test or something, and you can just, if you factor your IAC correctly, you can just run that against the test project, right? And it'll be exactly the same. That's what I've done with one of our clients. This gives you an extra layer where you can test that before. Not only that, you can inject, I'm assuming using resource overrides, you can inject different values to test it under different situations and different circumstances.
Yeah, 100%. Especially with the added variables, I think it's just focusing on streamlining that infrastructure build process even more, right? Terraform was great, but it had its limitations. It feels like OpenTofu is just going out and saying, hey, these are the things I didn't like about Terraform. Now let's fix it, which is great for developers.
Yeah, I mean, I'll link the article in the show notes, but if you look at the blog post as well, they link to a list of top voted issues that they're tackling. And, the top 10 off that list are all issues that have come from the Terraform GitHub.
Yeah.
Right. So OpenTofu's doing it. So it won't be long. I mean, we're already seeing an uptick in the number of downloads. It says here, we are happy to report that this number has increased roughly 30% to almost 1.8 million peak daily requests. So it's getting the uptake. It's getting the development. It doesn't have stupid licensing around it. How long before this is the norm? I'd wager very, very, very quickly this is going to become the norm.
Yeah, those were my thoughts as well when I especially read this article. Given it's from OpenTofu itself, so there will be a bit of bias on the claims, but just from a third person's perspective, reading these features, it just feels like it's just ticking all my wish list or alleviating all my gripes with Terraform as a tool.
Yeah, I'm going to have to. I might go in my own personal projects and flip over to this and just go from there with it. See how we go.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's move on. Wow. All right. Let's move on to the big boys here. VMware. Well, as we know, Broadcom have come and changed the licensing quite aggressively for VMware, and a lot of organisations, including we talked about in the last show, like the New South Wales government, are feeling the pinch now. It's hitting their wallets. New South Wales government, as we reported, spent 97 million on 12 months of VMware licensing. So obviously the hyperscalers have realised this. Oh, all the hyperscalers except for AWS, because AWS aren't offering VMware in the cloud anymore. Google are, and they've come out swinging quite aggressively. And I'll link the blog in the show notes. This, ironically, was published on July 19. That was the date we published our show, so it didn't make it into last fortnight's show. But yeah, Google have come out swinging with a bunch of new offers for their VMware cloud offering. And boy, this, I've got highlights and all sorts of notes about this blog article. Well, let's dive into it here. First first cab off the rank, and this is what excites me the most. They're offering a new node type. Now, I think I hinted at this last week. I kind of knew about this already, but now it's public information in this blog. There's a new node type called the VE2 node, and it comes in two shapes. You've got the VE2 standard and the VE2 mega. Now, the VE2 standard will give you 25.6 terabytes of raw storage, and the mega will give you 51.2 terabytes of raw storage. Now, along with that, they've also got a new hyperthread type. So you get the VE2 Mega 96, which will give you 96 hyperthreads, and the VE2 Mega 128, which will give you 128 hyperthreads. And there's also a VE2 standard with 96 hyperthreads. So that's your new VE2 node. Now, this is going to be really important for, apologies, there's also a VE2 standard 128. They've just, in this article, it's quite confusing the way they've laid it out. But that's going to be really important for enterprises setting up clusters in the cloud, because we're seeing now some clients come through and they've got huge estates and they've got clusters that aren't all going to be just needing one node type. If you can have these customized node types, it helps with your scaling and provisioning of the cluster, and it keeps the cost down because you've got the choice between capacity or threads. You don't need to just go with one sort of shape. Because what we're finding before is clients will come along and they go, oh, we've got heaps of storage requirements, so they need more nodes, but they're not using it into the CPU. Or they've got heaps of CPU and they just end up with storage that they're not using, one or the other. So now we have a couple of node types there to pick from. Now, along with that as well, there's also storage optimized nodes. So in VMware, you have storage optimized nodes, which just effectively give you storage on your vSAN and not much in the way of CPU. You don't run actual workloads on there. That's just for storage in your vSAN. And they come in two shapes, VE2 Standard, which is 25 terabytes, and VE2 Mega SA, which is 51.2 terabytes. So that's probably, for me, that's sort of designing these clusters and building these things. That's probably the most interesting thing that they've announced.
Yeah.
But coming along... Sorry, Dish.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you are the GCV expert in Mantel Group, so I'm not going to pretend to know all the configuration that you talked about. What I did find very interesting about this article was more from a investment perspective that Google is making for the
absolutely the incentives for businesses to come, right?
Yeah, correct. So, one of the biggest things that just caught my attention was that now they've openly claimed that they'll do no-fee assessments and POC for customers. Now, the interesting or the more relevant thing for us in Mantle Group is this will happen through Google's partner ecosystem, right? So I can see us getting extremely busy with, and you're already seeing this right now. I can see us, us getting extremely busy with these engagements in the future, because Google are essentially saying we'll fund through our PSF funding all the assessments and initial POCs for customers, and on top of that, Google are also providing new customers with Google Cloud Enterprise Agreements or Flex Agreements, which will provide migration services incentives of up to 25% and incremental consumption incentives of up to 15%.
Yep. And commercial incentives of up to 40% of GCV's first year spend. So it's quite significant, right? When you think of this big, these are not cheap estates, right? This is not a cheap product. And they are claiming that with all of this, it can be up to 30% less expensive than Azure VMware solution. Azure is the only game in town now against us. One of the other features I like, and this would have been after some long discussions with Broadcom, is license portability. So you can bring your own license if you've just laid out, for 3 months of licensing. Bring that across into your estate, and that'll help reduce your bill for however long that license is.
And do you think that's to encourage businesses to do the forward planning? So if they've already signed up for a 3-year license and now say they've got 2 years, they know that big license
that will not be
increase is coming, right? So why not port that over to Google Cloud, use those 2 years so that they're not, blowing up, just paying double licenses, etc.
Yeah, and it kind of had to be because the fee is so much. There's going to be friction within the business. They're not going to want to move because it's like, well, we've just paid for 3 years. We've got to get at least 2.5 years out of it. And then by the time they do that, they come to us and say, "Oh, we've got 56 nodes with 3,000 VMs on it. Can we move it into Google Cloud?" We'll say, "Well, you've left it a bit late, right? So it's going to take about 12 months to do all of that." And then guess what happens? They have to go off and buy another VMware license.
Yeah, like you pointed, Banky, the problem is not that they want to move that to GCVE. The problem is they want to do it in 3 months instead of 12 months.
Yeah.
And that's where the difficult conversations of we cannot feasibly do this start happening, and then it just becomes that vicious cycle of, okay, might as well continue on with Broadcom licenses for the next 3 years then.
That's right, and then they buy another 3 years. But that issue goes away because you can bring the license with you now. Fantastic. Google's now introduced support for VMware Cloud Foundation with a 20% lower commitment price, and so you get it 20% cheaper. Now, Cloud Foundation is the suite of additions that are sort of bundled. And it includes vSphere, vSAN, NSX, and HCX. So those are the tools that we use for setting up a client and migrating that already existed. And it includes new features such as ARIA Suite Enterprise, ARIA Operations for Network Enterprise. That's like your monitoring and etc. that you can use within VMware. Comprehensive monitoring, analytics, and insights for optimized application performance and resource utilization. So that's really cool, really nice to know. And on top of that, the old VE1 nodes are 22% cheaper as well. So if you're in there at the moment on your GCVE environment, you're going to start getting that cheaper. This is going to cause a lot of work for us, Sadish.
For you specifically, Banky.
For me specifically. Oh boy. It's good to know I'll be employed for the next 10 years because we've hardly scratched the surface of this, really. Like there's so many estates out there and people just want to get out of it.
Yeah.
It's been VMware for the last 20 years. They've been the go-to VMware private clouds. That's all it's been. And you want to pay through the nose for it for now, then that's your only option unless you go to one of the hyperscales.
Yeah. I mean, that's hopefully the pathway that they take, though, right? So it's GCVE and then modernization after that once you're in the cloud.
That's right. Yeah, this is going to accelerate modernization, like no doubt. I still feel we've got hurdles to get over, though. There's entire enterprises built around having an on-prem GCVE, on-prem VMware estate. You've got security teams, you've got operations teams, you've got capacity managers and all that. The concept of capacity management kind of goes away when you have an elastic environment, right? And you kind of don't need to do that. The whole idea of having to design and build I've actually seen this, right? A complex architecture and present that architecture as a solution. Here's how our VMware on-prem environment is going to look. Here's all the IP addresses and all that. All that goes away. You don't need to look at any of that. You don't need to design any of that. That is completely, you're not concerned with any of that anymore. The enterprises need to get used to that. And I don't think they're there yet.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Banky, some of the roles, especially one role that you mentioned was capacity planners. All of those roles probably turn into some kind of a cloud-based role, like SRE or a network engineer or a cloud engineer kind of role, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So you just need to get used to where VMware sits in cloud and what capacity management, for instance, means now, right? You might still have a hybrid environment where you've got on-prem. So, yeah, you're still looking at your on-prem links and stuff like that. So you've still got to monitor that capacity as well. You've still got vSAN capacity you've got to monitor. I guess it all gets driven by the cost then, right? That operational cost of running it, and the incentive becomes getting that cost down.
Yeah, correct. Because you're shifting from that model of your IT, in quotes, infrastructure being a capital expenditure to it being an operational expenditure now.
Exactly. Yep. And that to us as cloud engineers, that's not a new concept, right? But it still is a new idea to a lot of enterprises that are coming from VMware environments. All right, well, let's move on. After that sort of high of VMware, let's move on to some depressing news. Been a couple of outages.
More outages.
More outages. Now, you brought this one to my attention, XERO.
Yeah, so XERO was down, but the underlying issue for XERO being down was there was a big outage for AWS services on Tuesday or Wednesday, and one of the codes make me chuckle because it says Amazon Web Services was dealing with a significant outage Tuesday as Amazon-owned Whole Food supermarkets closed self-checkout lanes, delivery drivers abandoned their routes, and Alexa devices stopped working. The world's in chaos.
Well, know, the world's in chaos when Alexa devices stop working, right?
So the point is, I think there was a big AWS outage, which affected a lot of customers who are on AWS and Amazon themselves as well.
So that XERO being down effectively meant there was thousands of small businesses that use XERO. They couldn't charge, they couldn't pay, they couldn't do anything for a short period there while XERO was down. Once again, there it is, being multi-cloud, right?
Yeah, and the underlying reason for this was lots of errors that they saw and latencies that they received in the Kinesis APIs, especially in the US East 1 region. Right.
And along with that, Microsoft experienced a big outage just hours ago. And I don't have a lot of details on it at this point, but if you look at Down Detector, during our evening, there was a lot of reported problems with Microsoft. And funnily enough, I was on a Teams meeting this morning, and Teams just died for no apparent reason. So I'm not sure if it's an effect of that. But they identified the problem as a potential networking issue, air quotes on that one.
What does that mean?
What does that mean exactly? So we've got CrowdStrike, we've got AWS going down, and now we've got a massive Office 365 outage as well, which is rectified now. But we don't see Google going down, do we? Got to be careful what we say there. Touch wood. What's that about people in glass houses throwing stones? Yeah, look, try. Literally a project I'm working on at the moment is about that, right? Is about trying to take a product that a business is dependent on and showing that it can be run in another cloud environment. And in that cloud, we're taking this product from AWS and we have to remassage it and then get it to work in Google Cloud and show that it can work. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. The multi-clouds are there, then try and use them, right? Speaking of throwing stones in glass houses, Google Cloud projects are being hijacked for phishing campaigns. What's this all about, Adish?
The article talks about how there were multiple hacking collectives in Latin America were observed abusing Google Cloud's infrastructure in their phishing attacks. So it wasn't, I think it was using Google Cloud's infrastructure to do something. So the biannual Threats Horizon report, what Google reported was that at least 2 threat actors, Fluxroot and Pineapple, abused Google Cloud as part of their infrastructure. So the hackers used Google Cloud to do their hacking. So they're not even doing it from on-prem. Even hackers are growing.
Now, it looks like they had some Cloud Run instances and the phishing attack was redirecting them to the Cloud Run instance. Is that, am I
correct. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So, I mean, there's got to be a paper trail there, right? I mean, these were so these must be compromised accounts. Otherwise, there'd be paper trail there.
Yeah, like if you've done something in the cloud, there would always be paper trail because of your audit logs, all the logging system that you have. Unless you turn them off, you're going to get those logs somewhere, right?
Yeah, so ultimately in response to this, Google took down the malicious projects and updated its safe browsing list to include those URLs to block them. I think we're going to see more of this. And look, this is they've just found one. This is needle in a haystack, right? There's probably thousands, if not more, of compromised
100%.
accounts.
Especially with the possibilities of what can be done through your cloud services, and without paying for any of it. If you're using Cloud Run, you got a pretty gracious free tier anyways. More and more people are just gonna go around, do their stuff.
Spin up an account with a fake credit card, and you can automate all of that and just have at it. But that's not the only security issue that we saw this fortnight. Malicious Python package targets macOS and GCP credentials. This is interesting.
Yeah, so Checkmarx announced that a malicious Python package was being utilized to target Mac developers to gain access to their GCP account credentials. So essentially what this does is there's a malicious Python package that if you have in your computer, it essentially tries and gets your GCP credentials, and then that obviously the hackers will use those to get access to whatever your cloud environment looks like, whether it be projects or your whole GCP organization.
And that's right. But what's interesting about this, just taking a quote from the article there, it then retrieves the IO platform UUID of the Mac device, a unique identifier, and hashes it using the SHA-256 algorithm. This hash is compared against a predefined list of 64 Mac UUIDs. So it's specifically targeted at 64 Macs with these UUIDs, because it will only activate once it gets a match.
Yeah, so just trying to read between the lines here of using a fake LinkedIn profile for a fake company with those particular Macs. It just it just seems like, they were just after a particular set of information of an organization, or I don't know. It's very interesting on how someone is trying to get some very critical data from somewhere.
Something very specific. You're right, because they did set up this fake LinkedIn profile under the name of Lucid Zenith for some sort of social engineering maneuver. And this Lucid Zenith claims to be the CEO of Apex Companies LLC, which is not correct. And the writer of this article, interesting enough, went off and used some AI-powered search engines to look this up, and the results varied on who this individual was and what they did. So they sort of point out, look, don't take everything with a grain of salt when you search or you look or whatever, because there's something fishy going on with this account in order to harvest some information from these 64 Macs. Who knows what's going on?
Yeah, and this is probably the start point of, a lot of our security hacks that we hear about, a combination of social engineering attacks, targeted attacks, people doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and that's why we always promote the concept of multi-layer security, where security is everyone's responsibility almost, right? It's not just an organization-wide policy. Every developer, every engineering manager needs to be aware of those multiple gateways of maintaining security.
No, you are right. This does sound like the start of some hack we'd probably hear on the news in 3 weeks' time.
So watch out.
Yeah. How did they get that? Well, let me tell you a story. All right, cool. Let's do it. Let's get on with the AI wars. Apple says it trained its AI features on Google Tensor processing units. What?
Yeah, so if you are a keen listener, we talked about the Apple intelligence features in a few shows in the last. It wasn't the last show. It was a couple of shows back. We talked about Apple Intelligence and all the cool features introduced by Apple in their upcoming software update. So this article just is talking about how Apple used Google's tensor processing unit, or TPU, to train its AI models instead of NVIDIA hardware, which makes sense, I guess, to a certain extent. So, yeah, that's the crux of the article. Do note that some of the Apple intelligence features that Apple promised have been delayed. So, initially, the speculation, or rather the intention from Apple, was to release these features in September when they do their new iPhone releases as part of iOS 18.0, but they're pushing it back to late October, early November as part of a iOS 18.1 release.
And there's a little more detail here on the models. The models are pre-trained on V4 and V5P cloud TPU clusters. Apple writes the largest server model was trained using 8,192 TPU V4s, while the smaller, they've got 2 AFM models on device. The smaller on-device model was trained on just one slice of 2,048 TPU V5P chips. And, that makes Apple a Google customer now, I guess.
Yeah.
I couldn't see them going to Azure, to be honest with you. Interesting article. If you're an Apple fan, the link will be in the show notes. Go and have a look. But yeah, as you say, Dish, this is probably going to be launched in September, and we'll see exactly how this pans out for them. And moving on, this is just a quickie. OpenAI tests new search engine called SearchGPT. SearchGPT. Now, if you look up SearchGPT, and I know, ironically, I'm using Google to search for the term SearchGPT, you'll find the page, OpenAI, but you've got to join the waitlist. So this is OpenAI's foray into search.
Yeah, so SearchGPT will be launched for a small group of users and publishers before a wider rollout. So it's not quite out there, and you'll most likely hear more about it in our shows later down the line. But essentially, it's trying to incorporate the search features that into ChatGPT itself.
Yep.
Right, rather than having, and which makes sense to me. You wouldn't want to have multiple different things, which essentially do, help the user in the same way, right? And you can see where this is going. They're trying to be a direct competitor to Google because that's what Google does.
That's what Google does. Quote from the article: OpenAI said SearchGPT is a temporary prototype that will combine the company's AI models, such as ChatGPT, with the ability to search the internet. It will respond conversationally to searches while providing up-to-date information with clear links to relevant sources. So that's a differentiator there, I think.
Yeah, some of it, you can already do this in Gemini. I don't know if you've used this feature, Banky, but if you ask for a result in Gemini, you can do Google verify these results. And what you can do is what Gemini does rather is it'll give you links of the different sources from which it got those information. So Gemini is already doing some of it, but ChatGPT is going for a wider customer adoption of this, right?
Right. And interestingly, I found that their catch line is a new way to search, which is strikingly similar to Google Cloud's a new way to cloud.
Yeah, that's a good pickup.
And if you are using Terraform or Tofu or Gemini, then you're probably using Gemini Code Assist in your VS Code. And if you're not using that plugin now, then go pause the show now and go and get Gemini Code Assist and put it into VS Code. You can set it up for free now, and Google has extended the free trial until November 8th.
Yeah, that's great because initially the free trial was until earlier this year. So it was February, March. I can't remember the exact date.
July 11th was the deadline.
No, before that there was a separate deadline of earlier in the year.
Previously.
So and then they moved up to July 11th, and now it's been moved up to November 8th, which is great because I think that almost means a full year of Gemini Code Assist being free. Mm-hmm. I remember even last year, around November, I was using Gemini Code Assist, albeit as a beta user. But yeah, it would be almost like a full year of free Code Assist for developers. So
yeah, absolutely. And look, I think it's a fantastic tool. It gives really good results, and it's easy to use. The only problem that I see with it after November 8, the cost is going to be prohibitive for some people. The tool will cost $19 per month per license in a yearly subscription, or $22.80 per month when licensed monthly. I just can't see it getting across the line with that cost.
Yeah, and that's probably why they've extended it. This article talks about how Gemini ranks behind ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot in the AI search and developer tools category in Stack Overflow. So from a Google perspective, clearly they're not as good. From a customers don't find it as good as Copilot and ChatGPT, so Google are giving it more of a chance for people to use it, right?
Yeah, they should, and they should make the cost. I'm complaining, I'm yelling at a cloud. They should make it cheaper, like make it on a per lookup or something.
Yeah.
Every time you hit the API, it's like cents per lookup or something. Not a fixed monthly cost like that. That's US dollars as well. That's going to kill us.
I mean that what. GitHub Copilot is like $10 a month.
Yeah.
So,
it needs to be cheaper.
No surprises.
It's not going to fly.
If they made people pay for this, no one would buy it right now.
No one would use it. Yeah.
So either they're planning on some groundbreaking feature over the next 6 months, or rather 4 months, that's going to make it twice as usable as GitHub Copilot, or they'll figure out another way for pricing.
That could be a point there, actually. Maybe they've got some product launch between now and November to try and get some more people across while it's free.
My cynical belief is there's no free lunch. They're doing this for a reason. Thank you.
They're doing it for a reason. Okay. Well, there are other ways to use Gemini, and just for our last article here, how Google Cloud HR team used AI to transform their recruiting process and speed up employee onboarding. Now, just reading this article, it seems like internally in Google that the AI, and particularly they are using Gemini, is touching on just about every area inside Google, and HR recruiting is a perfect use case because you've got a lot of disparate data. You can feed all of that into the model, and you can use it to triage and sort that data. Now, you shouldn't use it to make your final selection. I think we've seen things in the past where human biases have come into models because the models have learnt from humans, and you end up with, biased choices. But certainly triaging and selecting and surfacing candidates that may not have otherwise been surfaced is a perfect use case for AI in this.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the big use cases that the article talks about is matching candidates to the right roles. And I think Google they'd be getting hundreds of thousands of, if not that, tens of thousands of applications on a monthly basis. So for them to find, the right role for the candidate and to do assessment of whether a candidate would be fitting for an open role, I think that's a perfect use case where AI would do a better job than humans, because a human cannot possibly go through that many applications and make an unbiased assessment.
Yeah, that's right. As long as you know that the model's not biased, right? As long as the model hasn't been trained from, previous selections that have been biased, then that's fine. But, I don't think the ultimate decision is left with the model, right? It's just helping you triage and sort that in, because you've got all these CVs and everyone's doing CVs in different ways. It's very difficult to sort through. It could take you hours and hours and hours maybe to take that data, put it in some sort of spreadsheet, then sort of, up select, who you think is going to fit the job, fit the role. Let the model do that for you instead.
Yeah. And the model's not the core decision maker. It's just an enabler to make those decisions faster for them.
Yep. And sort that data. But, it makes me wonder, do I write a CV now that's AI optimized?
how does one do
that,
a CV that's AI optimized?
Well, I don't know. I'm just putting the idea out there.
Use Gemini to write that CV.
Well, up to now, it's all been about, presenting yourself, in a CV that looks good, and it's clear and it's concise. But the model doesn't care about that, right? It just takes the data and then just spits it out at the other end for someone to look at. Okay, let's make that so it hits hardest.
Yeah, I mean,
don't know how you do that.
If you figure it out, do tell me.
No, not that I'm looking for another job, but someone out there might be, and just be aware that if you are applying for jobs at Google, this is what they're doing now. All right, well, that's probably it for this fortnight. It's been a great show. The clock is ticking over there, and I had a massive downpour here during the recording as well. So I'm going to have my editing work cut out for me. Don't forget, we are on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. You can go to iTunes and write a review for the show. That would really help us out. You can find us on YouTube. Once you go to YouTube and start the discussions there in the comments, you can contact the show, gcplife@mentalgroup.com.au. And of course, today's show was sponsored by Mental Group. At Mental Group, we make your Google Cloud solutions possible. That's about it from me. You got anything else to add, Adish?
Nothing much, Banky. Longer show than normal, I'd say, today. Lots of interesting topics around VMware, around Open Tofu. So, yeah, very, very exciting show today.
It's a cracker. And we'll catch you next fortnight. Bye.
See ya. I think I've realized what the issue is. I think my computer starts struggling after I do open Audacity for some reason.
Right. Max, hey?
Yeah. Doesn't like Audacity.
Yeah.
Seems.
Max is the way, unless you want to actually do something like record a podcast.
Yeah.